After a fight with my husband, I went to stay at my mom's place. When I told her about our argument, she suddenly turned pale and said, "Honey, you have to go back and check the bathroom mirror." I asked in shock, "Mom, why?" But she grabbed my hand tightly. There's no time to explain it before it's too late. The fear in her eyes left me no choice. So I rushed back home. When I found a hidden camera behind the mirror and played the recording, I finally understood why my mom was so terrified. Before Natalie pulled that awful truth out with her own hands, it was just an ordinary evening. A regular Tuesday evening that started with exhaustion and ended with screaming. It all began as usual with a phone call. Gregory was talking to his mother, Margaret Vine, and Natalie, chopping vegetables in the kitchen, caught fragments of their conversation. She tried not to listen. She really did. She knew nothing good would come of it. But Margaret's voice, even muffled through the phone, crept under the skin, commanding, condescending, not tolerating objections. Gregory hung up and walked into the kitchen with that look on his face Natalie had learned to hate, a mix of guilt and stubbornness. He went to the fridge, grabbed the bottle of water, took a long sip, silent. "Something happened?" Natalie asked, though she already knew the answer. The knife in her hand froze above the cutting board. "No, everything's fine," Gregory answered without looking at her. "Mom just called. She's asking how we're doing. And how are we doing in her opinion?" He sighed heavy, tortured, as if she had already started a fight, not him with his behavior. "Natalie, let's not do this. She's just worried. She says the crowd at your restaurant is all kinds of people, that working late nights is exhausting and unsafe. She thinks that as the wife of a company director, it doesn't suit you to be carrying plates." There it was again. Same words, same song. "Not Gregory. I worry about your wife, but Gregory, your wife embarrasses our family." Natalie set down the knife. Her hands were trembling slightly. She turned to her husband. "Gregory, we've gone over this 1,000 times. I like my job. I like the people I work with. I don't want to sit at home staring at walls. And I don't just carry plates. I'm a senior waitress, practically a manager. I have responsibilities, a team." "Yeah, I get it," he waved his hand. "But try to understand her too. She's from a different generation. For her, status matters. Our status, ours or yours and hers. When we got married, you knew where I worked. You were fine with it. What changed? Oh right. Your mom decided that having a waitress daughter-in-law is a disgrace at city receptions." His face tightened up. "Don't twist things. My mother only wants what's best for us. She just wants to help. She even offered to pay for some courses for you. Design courses, maybe." At those words, a cold shiver ran through Natalie. Condescension wrapped in fake concern. It was worse than open hatred. "I don't need her help, and I don't need her money. I just want her to leave us alone. Gregory, you and me are family. Why can't you ever tell her no? Why is her opinion always more important than mine?" The screen tore out by itself. It filled the small kitchen, bounced off the walls. Gregory flinched. "Stop yelling," he hissed back. "You're acting hysterical. She's my mother. I can't just cut her off." "I'm not asking you to cut her off. I'm asking you to set boundaries, to tell her this is our life and we'll decide where I work and where we live." "What's wrong with where we live?" His eyes narrowed. "Oh right. Mom mentioned an apartment in a better neighborhood. She's even ready to help with the down payment." That was the last straw. Natalie felt a wave of rage and hurt crash over her. He wasn't just repeating his mother's words. He agreed with them. He was looking at their life through her eyes. And in those eyes, their apartment was a shabby hole. Her job a disgrace. And she herself a stubborn, ungrateful girl who needed to be re-educated. "Get out," she said quietly. But with such force he took a step back. "What?" "I said get out. Go to your mother. Live in a nice neighborhood. I'll stay here in our little apartment." "Natalie, this isn't funny. I'm not joking." She grabbed her car keys and purse from the hallway hook, didn't even put on a jacket, though the autumn evening was chilly. She slammed the door so hard the glass and the corridor probably rattled. She heard Gregory shout something after her but didn't catch the words and didn't want to. In the car she started shaking. Tears streamed down her cheeks, blurring the city lights. Where could she go? Not to her friends to hear their sympathetic sighs. There was only one person she could show up to in any state at any hour. Her mother. The drive to her mom's house took about 20 minutes. 20 minutes for the rage to fade into a bitter gnawing emptiness. She parked in the yard of the old apartment building, climbed to the third floor that smelled of dust and something faintly familiar from childhood. She rang the doorbell. Her mother, Na, opened almost right away in a housecoat, holding a book. The moment she saw Natalie's face, she understood everything. "Sweetheart, what happened? Come in." In the small, cozy kitchen packed with books and jars of homemade preserves, Natalie finally let the tears out. She sat at the table, clutching the cup of hot tea her mother had silently set before her, and talked. She talked in fragments, jumping from one thing to another, about Margaret's call, about design courses, about the shameful job and the tiny apartment, about how Gregory kept silent and nodded, how he looked at her with someone else's eyes, his mother's eyes. Na listened quietly, just stroking her daughter's hand. Her face was sympathetic but calm. Just another family quarrel. Who hasn't been through that? Natalie had poured her heart out and finally calmed down a little. She lifted her head to thank her mother and froze. Her mother no longer looked calm. Her face had turned as pale as paper. The cup in her hand trembled, spilling tea onto the tablecloth. Her eyes were wide with a kind of terror Natalie had never seen in her before, as if she hadn't just heard about a family quarrel, but a death sentence. Mom, what's wrong? Are you feeling sick?" Na didn't answer. She was staring through Natalie, her lips moving soundlessly. Then she suddenly set the cup down. "Natalie," her voice was hoarse, strangled. "You must go back home immediately." Natalie was stunned. "Go back home? Mom, I don't want to see him right now. I'll stay with you." "No." Na's shout made Natalie flinch. Her mother had never raised her voice to her. "You don't understand. You have to go now, alone." She leaned forward across the table, her fingers digging into Natalie's arm with surprising strength. "Listen to me carefully. You go home. You go to the bathroom and you check the mirror." Natalie stared at her confused. "What mirror? Mom, what are you talking about? Why would I check a mirror?" Her mother grabbed her hand tighter, her nails biting into the skin. "There's no time to explain, honey. Do it before it's too late." The fear in her eyes left Natalie no choice. This wasn't madness, not a sudden lapse of reason. It was raw, primal fear. Fear for her, for Natalie. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Natalie gave a silent nod. She rose from the table. All the anger at Gregory, all the hurt, vanished, swallowed by a chilling sense of dread. She didn't ask any more questions. She just walked out, ran down the stairs and got into the car. The drive back was like a blur. One phrase kept pounding in her head, her mother's broken whisper. "Check the bathroom mirror." What could it mean? What was there? Had Gregory hidden something, Margaret? Could they have installed a camera? The thought was insane. Paranoid even, but her mother's terror had been too real. Natalie knew about them. Her mother had once shown her a few. She untied the ribbon. The handwriting was neat, almost calligraphic, exactly what you'd expect from a teacher. "My dearest Nina, I can't wait to see you. I think about you every minute." The letters were tender, a little old-fashioned, full of respect and gentle love. The story of how they met, their romance, their wedding. It was all part of family lore, something Natalie had known by heart. She was about to close the box, disappointed and confused. No clues. Everything was exactly as she had always known. But then her fingers brushed against something hard at the very bottom, under the letters. She reached in and pulled it out. It was a single photograph, not like the others, printed on thick glossy paper, foreign, almost out of place. And the image, Natalie froze. It was her mother, very young, maybe 20, leaning against a tree, laughing, so happy, so carefree. Natalie had never seen her smile like that in real life. She wore a simple summer dress. Her hair caught in the breeze. She was stunning, but that wasn't the shocking part. Beside her, with his arm draped around her shoulders, stood a man. And it wasn't her father. Natalie brought the photo closer to the light. The stranger was tall, dark-haired, with a strong jaw and piercing, slightly mocking eyes. He wasn't smiling, but everything about him radiated strength and confidence. Between him and her mother, there was something undeniable. A chemistry, a spark you couldn't fake. They looked perfect together, like two halves of one whole. Who was he? A brother? No, her mother was an only child. Friend. But friends don't embrace like that. And her mother's gaze, adoring, trusting, wasn't how you looked at a friend. With trembling fingers, Natalie turned the photo over. On the back, in bold, sweeping handwriting, were the words, "To my Nenana forever." The letter N. Her father's name was Andrew Davidson. That didn't fit. Natalie's heart froze and then started pounding wildly. This was it, the beginning of the thread. She was holding in her hands a fragment of her mother's other life. A life that existed before her father. Or maybe instead of him. Her mother's words echoed in her head again. "It's about who you are." She shot to her feet, shoved the photo into the pocket of her jeans. Everything else, letters, documents, other pictures, she swept back into the box carelessly. She had to go back to her mother. Now she didn't just have a suspicion. She had proof. Proof that her life was a lie. She sped through the night city, ignoring the speedometer. She stood in front of her mother's apartment door. This time she didn't ring. She knocked, 3 sharp, demanding knocks. Na opened. She hadn't gone to bed. Her eyes were red, her face exhausted. When she saw Natalie, she flinched. "Sweetheart, please go," she whispered. But Natalie didn't move. She stepped inside silently, went straight to the kitchen, and sat down at the table. She pulled the photograph from her pocket and laid it face up on the table beside the cold cup of tea. Na slowly followed. Her gaze fell on the photo. In that moment, all her composure, all her walls, finally collapsed. A low sound escaped her like the cry of a wounded animal. Her legs gave way, and she dropped heavily onto the stool opposite. She stared at the photo as if she'd seen a ghost. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "From the box with Dad's things," Natalie answered evenly. She wasn't looking at the photo, but straight into her mother's eyes. Who is he?" Na covered her face with her hands and shook with silent sobs. A minute passed. Then Natalie waited. She wasn't leaving without an answer. Finally, Nina lowered her hands. Her face was wet with tears. She looked at the laughing girl and confident man in the old picture, then at her grown daughter, stern, demanding the truth. She took a deep breath, summoning the strength for words that would destroy everything. Her voice broke. He tried again. "He is your father, Natalie." He paused. And in that pause, Natalie's world shattered. "Your real father." Those 3 words weren't shouted. They were whispered. But the whisper rang in Natalie's ears like a scream. She sat perfectly still, staring at her mother. Her mind was blank. No thoughts, no emotions. Only white noise. The man she had called Dad all her life, who had taught her to ride a bike, checked her homework, snuck her ice cream behind her mother's back. He wasn't her father. And this stranger in the photo, with his confident gaze and strong arms, he was. Natalie slowly lowered her eyes to the photograph. She looked at it differently now. Searching the man's face for herself. The shape of the chin, the eyes. She found nothing. All she saw was a stranger who had ruined her life without even stepping into it. How? Was all she could manage. Na seemed to have been waiting for that question. Now that the worst truth was out, it was as if a dam had broken. Her words flowed, steady as though rehearsed. She spoke quietly, flatly, staring out at the dark window where their dimly lit kitchen reflected back. His name is Nicholas. Nicholas Frost. He was my first love, Natalie. Probably my only one. I met him when I was 19. He wasn't like anyone else. Strong, bold, fearless. He had big plans for his life. He wanted to start his own business, some kind of small workshop. I was crazy about him. We were going to get married. She paused, ran a hand over her face. I was already pregnant with you when it all happened. We hadn't told anyone. We wanted to marry first. And then, he was arrested. Natalie's head jerked up. Got arrested for what? Fraud, large-scale embezzlement, something like that. It was connected to his job. It all happened so fast. A raid, interrogations, the trial. They gave him a long sentence, very long. He wrote to me from prison, swore he was innocent, begged me to wait. Nina let out a bitter laugh. And what was I supposed to do? Alone with a baby. Branded the girlfriend of a criminal, a fraud. People pointed fingers at me. My parents were horrified. And then Andrew came along. Your father. He worked at the same school as my mother. He'd been in love with me for a long time. He knew. He came and said, "Marry me. I'll adopt the baby. Give her my name. No one will ever know." He was decent, reliable. He saved me. Saved us both. I agreed. I burned all of Nicholas's letters. Married Andrew, gave birth to you, and we never spoke of it again. Andrew was a wonderful father. He loved you more than life itself. Her story poured out smooth and steady, like a lesson memorized long ago. A story of betrayal, fear, and rescue. But Natalie needed to know something else. And now, why did Margaret find out about this now? He got out, Nina said softly. A few months ago. Served almost the whole sentence. He came back to town. He found me. I begged him not to contact you, not to ruin your life. I gave him some money so he could rent a place, get by. We met in secret a few times. And then someone must have seen us and told Margaret. And she realized what kind of weapon had fallen into her hands. She came to me and said she knew whose child my daughter really was, and that if I didn't do what she ordered, she would tell Gregory and you and the whole town that Gregory Vine's wife is the daughter of a criminal. Now everything fit. Every link snapped into place. Blackmail. Her mother's fear. Her desperate attempt to protect her from a truth more terrifying than Natalie could have imagined. Natalie stood up. The numbness was gone. In its place burned rage, cold, sharp rage. Not at her mother, not at her late stepfather, not even at this mythical Nicholas. All of it was aimed at one person, Margaret. That woman hadn't just meddled in her family. She had trampled on her father's grave, blackmailed her mother, and treated her like a fool. "Where does he live?" she asked. Her voice was hard. Na looked at her in fear. "Natalie, don't. Why? What do you want to do?" "I want to look my real father in the eye." Natalie shot back. "I have that right. Where does he live?" Na hesitated, but looking at her daughter's face, older, hardened overnight, she knew there was no point in arguing. She tore a page from her notebook, her hand trembling as she wrote down an address. "Please be careful. He's changed a lot." Natalie took the slip of paper without a word. She left the apartment, her mother breaking down in tears at the kitchen table beside the photograph of her past. Back in the car, Natalie drove toward the address. It led her into a run-down neighborhood, rows of shabby houses where decent people avoided going. Rage and a twisted, painful curiosity pushed her forward. She wanted to see him, the man whose existence had turned her whole life into a lie. She found the building, a gray, lifeless block with grimy windows. Park stepped out. The air here was different, thick with dampness and hopelessness. She found the right entrance, Klein, 4th floor. His door was covered with cracked faux leather. No number plate, just 27, scratched into it with a nail. She froze in front of it. What would she even say? "Hello, I'm your daughter." The thought was absurd, but it was too late to turn back. She took a deep breath and knocked. Lock click. The door opened a crack on a chain. In the darkness she saw an eye, Tired, faded, suspicious. "Who are you looking for?" The voice was rough, Smoker rasped. Natalie couldn't speak. She just stood there staring. The man stared back. Suspicion shifted to confusion. Then recognition. Recognition mixed with pain and shock. He saw it in her face. Something of Nina. "Nina," he rasped. "No," Natalie finally managed. "I'm her daughter, Natalie." The chain rattled. The door swung open, and there he stood. Nicholas Frost. Not the confident man from the photograph. Before her was an old, stooped man in a stretched-out tank top and worn sweatpants. Deep wrinkles carved his face. His hair was gray and thin. Only his eyes still held a trace of that piercing look from long ago. He stepped back, letting her in. "Come in." Inside was bare and bleak. Naked walls, an old couch with a faded throw, a table with an overflowing ashtray. The smell of tobacco and emptiness clung to everything. Natalie stepped into the middle of the room. He closed the door behind her. They stood facing each other in heavy silence. "You told her?" he finally asked. Natalie nodded. "Not everything," she said. "You were arrested." A bitter smile tugged at his lips. He sank onto the couch, pulled out a cigarette, lit it. His hands shook. "Nice word, arrested. They erased me, wiped me out. I wanted to start a business. Had partners. We'd nearly sealed the deal. We were going to rent a small workshop, manufacture parts. I had all the numbers, all the contacts. I was young. I trusted people." He looked at Natalie, and for a moment, that old confidence flickered in his eyes. Then a week before signing, inspectors came to the company. They found shortages, huge ones. All the paperwork had my name on it. Invoices, signatures. Everything said I'd been skimming stock for months. I shouted it was forged. I was framed. No one listened. The investigator laughed in my face. It was clean. Too clean. He exhaled, coughed. "Your mother, Nina. She believed me until the end. But I guess someone explained to her that it was better to be the wife of a teacher than the girlfriend of a criminal. I don't blame her. She was protecting you." Natalie listened, cold rage mixing with something new. Pity. Pity for this broken man aged before his time. "Who?" she asked. "Who framed you?" Nicholas raised his faded eyes to her. He stared for a long moment, weighing whether he could trust her. Then slowly, deliberately, he spoke. "I was a naive fool. I told everyone my plans. I showed them everything, even my two so-called partners, the men I was supposed to build that business with. They saw it was profitable and decided they didn't need me. They pushed me out, took my idea. One of them was Margaret's late husband, Frederick Vine. And the other? The other was that quiet, respectable history teacher who later took in your mother. Your stepfather, Andrew Davidson." Natalie felt the ground slip from under her feet. Her world hadn't just collapsed. It had never existed at all. Frederick Vine, Andrew Davidson. Two names. Two men who had shaped her entire life. Her mother-in-law's husband, the powerful patriarch whose portrait hung in their mansion, and her stepfather, the kind, quiet teacher. Both of them were criminals, thieves, traitors. She pressed her hand against the cold wall to steady herself. I don't believe it," whispered Natalie, though deep down she already did. Everything finally made sense. Margaret clinging to this secret, the blackmail, her mother's fear, her stepfather's silence. Nicholas finished his cigarette and crushed the butt into the ashtray. "Believe it or not, it changes nothing. They planned it all. While I sat in prison, they started that very workshop with my money, my ideas. Frederick was a sharp dealer. Your stepfather. He took his cut, stepped aside, bought himself a reputation as a decent man. Very convenient." Natalie didn't know what to say. Scenes flashed through her mind. Margaret lecturing her, Gregory complaining, her mother crying as she planted a bug, Andrew smiling in a photo. All links in one chain of lies, betrayal and fear. "I'm going home," she said finally. "Where?" Nicholas asked. "Home," she said over her shoulder. She left the stairwell, got into her car, and looked in the rearview mirror. A stranger stared back at her, eyes blazing with fury. She was the daughter of a victim, the wife of a criminal's son, the adopted daughter of another criminal. Her identity had shattered into pieces. She drove through the night, no destination, trying to piece together what was left of her world. After an hour, she returned home. Gregory was gone. On the kitchen table lay a note. Went to work. Tonight we need to talk. Love you. Natalie crumpled it and threw it in the trash. Talking to Gregory was the last thing she wanted. Just then her phone rang. Unknown number. Natalie, it's me, came her mother's shaky, frightened voice. Did you go to him? Yes, Natalie answered shortly. Her mother gasped. Baby, please stop. Don't do this. Margaret, she knows everything. Natalie felt ice inside her. She knows everything. Yes, she knows you went to Nicholas. She's furious. If you don't stop digging, she'll act. And what will she do? Natalie asked bitterly. Twist it. She'll paint Nicholas as a blackmailer and you as his crazy accomplice. No one will believe an Exxon, they'll all believe her, Nina whispered. The widow of a respected man. Please, my daughter, for me, let it go. Natalie ended the call without a word. Margaret's threats, spoken through her terrified mother, only fueled her fire. That meant she was on the right track. That meant Margaret was afraid. The entire next day, Natalie drifted in a strange, suspended state. She didn't go to work, calling in sick instead. The thought of finding Paul consumed her, but she knew every step she took was being watched. She had to lay low, pretend she was scared and compliant. That evening, Gregory came home. He was tense and gloomy. They ate dinner in silence. The air between them was so heavy it could be cut with a knife. We need to go somewhere, he said suddenly, pushing his plate away. Where? Natalie asked flatly. There's a dinner at City Hall tonight. Some kind of anniversary. All the major business people and city leaders are invited. My mother insisted we go. She said it's important for the family's reputation. Natalie wanted to refuse. The thought of sitting at the same table with Margaret, smiling and pretending everything was fine, made her sick. But then she reconsidered. This was a chance to look her enemy in the eye. To show she wasn't afraid. Fine, she said. I'll go. She put on a simple, strict black dress, did understated makeup, and pulled her hair into a tight bun. She wasn't getting ready for dinner. She was getting ready for battle. The banquet hall at City Hall was packed. Glasses clinked. Soft music played. Polished, important people mingled through the room. This was Margaret's world, a world where she was queen. Natalie felt like an intruder, an imposter. They took their seats. Margaret was already there. She sat at the head of the table like an empress on her throne, surrounded by her loyal circle. When she saw Natalie, she gave her a cold, faint smile, the smile of a victor. The evening dragged painfully slow. Natalie barely ate, replying mechanically to meaningless questions from neighbors at the table. She could feel her mother-in-law's stare, sharp and constant. Margaret was watching her, weighing her, savoring her power. Then the moment came. After the official speeches and toasts, when the guests had relaxed and the room buzzed with chatter, Margaret stood. She lifted her glass, drawing attention. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention? Her commanding voice cut through the noise, silencing the room. I'd like to take this opportunity to make a small announcement. Her eyes swept the hall with triumph. As you know, our family has always been dedicated to charity. We support hospitals, schools, orphanages. But today I've decided to take a new direction. I want to establish a special foundation. A foundation to help and rehabilitate former prisoners, to give them a chance to get back on their feet and find their place in society. She paused, and in that moment, her gaze met Natalie's across the hall. Her eyes burned with a cold fire. I believe everyone deserves a second chance, even those who once stumbled. And I want to announce that our family will make the first contribution to this fund. She named the sum. It was huge. A murmur of approval rippled through the room. It was brilliant, twisted, and cruel. A public slap in the face. A warning only Natalie could understand. I know about your convict father. I know you're meeting with him. One more step and I'll tell everyone, but not as my husband's crime. I'll spin it as my charity to a poor ex-con being exploited by his greedy daughter. Natalie felt the blood drain from her face. People around her began whispering. Guests at her table threw her sidelong, curious glances. They didn't know the details, but they sensed something was wrong. Gregory sat beside her, pale as death, unable to lift his eyes. He understood everything. The humiliation was complete. Margaret had crushed her in front of the whole city. She'd shown her who was in charge. Natalie rose from the table. I need to step out, she whispered to Gregory, and without looking at anyone, she headed for the exit. She crossed the hall with her back straight, feeling dozens of curious and pitying eyes on her. She wasn't running. She was retreating to regroup. Outside, she drew in the cold night air. The humiliation hadn't broken her. On the contrary, it hardened her rage, forged it into cold, sharp steel. She would hide no longer. She would fear no longer. She would find Paul no matter the cost. She didn't go home. She drove to the city library, the one where her mother had worked all her life. She knew the archive section held bound collections of old newspapers. The library was nearly empty. The sleepy attendant gave her a surprised look but let her through. Natalie went down to the basement storage. The air smelled of dust and time. She found the right shelf, pulled over a desk lamp, and began flipping through yellowed pages. Day by day, week by week, she searched for any mention of the theft at the plant. After a couple of hours, she found it. A few short notes in the crime section. Major embezzlement uncovered. A thief belongs in prison. The name Nicholas Frost, the amount of damages, the sentence. No details, no names beyond the convicted man's. Dry official. A dead end. She sat over the newspapers, despair rising in her throat again. Nicholas had been right. No leads. She was about to give up when her eyes caught the neighboring page. The city life section, weddings, anniversaries, obituaries. Out of idle curiosity, she skimmed the small notices. And then she froze. A tiny announcement at the very bottom of the page. The paper, dated 1 week after Nicholas's sentencing. The staff of the plant expresses condolences for the untimely passing of Chief Accountant Peter, and extends sympathies to his loving widow, Sarah. Natalie read it twice. The chief accountant was dead. But that wasn't it. She kept reading, scanning all the little notes. Then she saw it. Due to restructuring and staff cuts, junior accountant Paul Jackson has been dismissed. Management thanks him for his conscientious work. Jackson. Paul Jackson. That was his name. She'd found him. But the next line stopped her heart. Paul passed away suddenly of a heart attack 2 days after his dismissal. Survived by his loving wife, Helen, and their young daughter. He was dead. The only witness had been dead for 36 years. This was the end. But there was more. Something that made her heart pound wildly again. The widow Helen Jackson, not just a name. In the condolence note from neighbors, her full address was listed. Helen Jackson and an address. An old street on the edge of town. Natalie sat in the silent basement, staring at the words. Paul was dead, the only witness, but he hadn't been alone. He'd had a wife, a widow, and she might still be alive. Her hands trembling, she snapped a photo of the notice on her phone. The address. Not just an address, maybe a key. Maybe the last one. She returned home late that night. Gregory was already asleep, or pretending to be. Natalie slipped quietly into the bedroom but couldn't lie down. She sat at her computer and typed Helen Jackson into the search bar. Nothing. Then she tried the old address from the paper. The house was long gone, replaced by a faceless apartment block. Another dead end. But she didn't give up. She tried again, searching by name, digging through phone directories and databases. An hour passed, then another, and then luck. In a leaked pension fund database, she found her. Jackson, Helen. The birth year matched, and a new address appeared. A house in a village 30 kilometers away. She wrote the address on a slip of paper. Tomorrow morning she would go there. The night dragged in heavy, sticky half-sleep. She dreamed of yellowed newspaper pages, of Margaret's mocking face, of Nicholas's hollow eyes. She woke exhausted but determined. She waited until Gregory left for work, then got into her car. The drive out of the city felt like traveling to another world. Factories gave way to fields and forests. The village was old, run down, with crooked fences and overgrown lots. She drove slowly along the cracked dirt road, searching for the house number. There it was, a small but well-kept house painted cheerful yellow, with neat garden beds and flowers along the fence. On the porch, in a wicker chair, sat an elderly woman reading a book. Natalie parked by the gate. Her heart pounded. She got out of the car and walked up to the fence. The woman lifted her head from the book, peered over her glasses. Her eyes were sharp. "Alive," she said. "Who are you looking for, dear?" "Hello, I'm looking for Helen Jackson." "Well, that's me." The woman set her book aside. "And who might you be?" Natalie opened the gate and stepped into the yard. She walked up to the porch. "My name is Natalie Davidson. I'm the daughter of Nicholas Frost." At the mention of Nicholas, the woman's eyes narrowed. She took off her glasses and studied Natalie from head to toe. There was no surprise, no sympathy in her gaze. Something else flickered there. An old, cold interest. "Frost. I saw your old man on TV the other day in the news. Something about charity and ex-cons, Margaret Vine's handiwork." Natalie's breath caught. This woman knew everything. "Sit down since you came." Helen nodded at the wicker chair beside her. "Tell me why you're here. I doubt you drove all this way just to meet an old hag." Natalie sat. She decided not to waste time. "My father said your husband, Paul, was the only one who knew he'd been framed." Helen gave a bitter smile. "Of course he knew. My Paul was an honest man. Honest to the point of nausea, an idealist. He believed in justice, and that's what cost him his life." She looked off into the distance at the tops of the pines. "He came home the day they fired him, white as chalk. He said to me, 'Helen, they're stealing. Stealing big, and they're pinning it all on that boy Frost.' I saw the papers. They forged everything. I tried to reach the higher-ups, but they threw me out." He was crushed. Not by being fired. No, by the fact that he couldn't stop it. 2 days later his heart gave out. Official diagnosis: heart attack. But I know what killed him. They killed him. Not with a bullet, not with a knife. Injustice killed him." She fell silent. Natalie saw tears glint in her eyes, but Helen quickly brushed them away. "I'm so sorry," Natalie said softly. "Don't be," Helen snapped. "Pity is for the weak." "I'm not weak. I just hate all these years. I hate the Vine family. I hate their whole rotten clan for what they did to my Paul, for building their dirty fortune on his death and on your father's ruined life." Her voice rang with decades of bottled-up hatred. Natalie realized she had found not just a witness but an ally. "Can you help me?" Natalie asked. Do you still have any of his papers, notes? Anything that could prove what he said?" Helen looked at her long and hard, as if weighing her. "And why do you want this? To avenge Daddy or squeeze money out of the Vine family?" "I want justice," Natalie answered firmly. "I want the truth to come out. I want Margaret Vine to answer for everything, for my father and for your husband." Something shifted in Helen's eyes. She no longer saw a beggar. She saw a fighter, one like herself. "My Paul was meticulous, pedant. He never threw anything away," Helen said slowly, rising from her chair. "He used to say, 'Paper doesn't lie. People do. Come on.'" She led Natalie inside. The house was as neat and orderly as the yard. It smelled of dried herbs and wood. They climbed the creaky wooden stairs to the attic. The attic was packed with old things, but everything was neatly stacked and covered with cloth. In the farthest corner stood a big iron-bound chest, thick with dust. "There," Helen said, pointing at it. "His archive. After he died, I put everything in here. I couldn't bring myself to throw it out. Thought maybe one day it would matter. Maybe that day's come." She blew dust off the lid, pulled a small key from her apron pocket, and opened the lock. The heavy lid creaked up. Inside lay folders, notebooks, ledgers, everything labeled in Paul's precise handwriting. Natalie felt like an archaeologist opening a pharaoh's tomb. She began carefully going through the papers. Old work diaries where Paul had detailed every single day, copies of orders, memos. An hour slipped by, fascinating but nothing that proved anything. "His personal notes should be here," Helen muttered, digging deeper into the chest. "He kept them separate. He trusted no one." She pulled out several thick hard-bound notebooks from the bottom. "Here, check these." Natalie took one and opened it. She froze. It wasn't a diary. It was an accounting ledger, a big register where Paul had copied numbers, invoices, data by hand. She flipped through it. Numbers, 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 meaningless to her. But in the margins, written in smaller, tighter script, were notes. "Check invoice number mismatch with warehouse data. Batch written off without paperwork. Request from FV and AD gave verbal order to close report without warehouse manager signature. FV and AD, Frederick Vine and Andrew Davidson." Natalie felt chills crawl down her spine. This was it. Proof. Irrefutable. She flipped feverishly. And then, near the end, she froze again. It wasn't just numbers. It was a summary table, neatly ruled by hand. 2 columns. Official reports and actual stock. The discrepancies were enormous. At the bottom, a note. Embezzlement scheme organized by FV and AD. Total shortage as of 15.03. Then the exact amount, matching the figure from Nicholas's case. But that wasn't all. The chest had a false bottom. Helen hooked her nails under the lining and lifted it. Beneath, in a hidden compartment, lay something else. Not a notebook, a full accounting book. Thick hardbound. Natalie opened it. It was the shadow ledger. Black bookkeeping. In Paul's elegant handwriting, every illegal transaction was logged. Where the goods went, who received them, the sums that bypassed the books. In the margins, written in red pencil, were notes that left no doubt. Share of FV transferred to AD. Profit from cover-up split 50-50. Approved by both. This wasn't just evidence. It was a sentence. Natalie held the ledger in her hands, and her fingers trembled. This was a weapon, powerful, undeniable. She stared at the neat columns of numbers, the red pencil notes, and understood she was holding the fate of the Vine family and the fate of her stepfather's memory. "Here it is," she whispered, lifting her eyes to Helen. The old woman looked at the ledger with grim satisfaction. "My Paul knew they'd kill him. If not physically, then morally. He prepared for it. He gathered all this so one day someone would find it and set things right. He believed that day would come." Natalie carefully closed the book. She felt its weight, both physical and moral. "I can't take it," she said. "It's too dangerous. If Margaret finds out, she won't." Helen cut her off. "How could she? But you're right. The original stays here. Safer with me than with you. Take photos, every page. And never tell anyone where you got it." Natalie pulled out her phone and began frantically snapping pictures, page after page. Each flash felt like a gunshot. She photographed the ledger, the diaries, the tables. She was creating a digital copy of the verdict. Leaving Helen's house, Natalie felt like a different person. The fear and confusion were gone. In their place was a heady, dangerous sense of power. She was no longer the victim. She was the hunter, and she had proof that could destroy Margaret. On her way back to the city, she called the only person she thought she could trust completely. Her best friend, Anna Williams. They'd worked together at the restaurant for nearly 10 years, and Anna was like a sister to her. She knew all of Natalie's secrets, her joys and her grief. "Anna, hi. We need to meet right away," Natalie said urgently. It's really, really important. What happened? You sound shaken, Anna replied, worried. Gregory again. Worse, much worse. Let's meet at our cafe in an hour. They met in the little coffee shop where they often went after shifts. Natalie arrived first and ordered coffee. When Anna came in, she took one look at her and knew it was serious. Natalie, you look awful. What happened? And Natalie told her everything. The fight with Gregory, the bug in the bathroom, the blackmail, the truth about her father, about Nicholas, the prison, the setup. She spoke in a rush, stumbling over her words, afraid to miss a single detail. Anna listened wide-eyed, her face a mix of horror and sympathy. Then Natalie pulled out her phone. And this is what I found today. She opened her gallery and showed Anna the photos of the ledger pages, explaining the notes marked FV and AD. Anna stared at the screen, her face growing paler with each page. Oh my God, she whispered. Natalie, this is monstrous. Your stepfather and Gregory's father. I can't believe it. It's the truth. And now I have proof. I can destroy her. You have to, Anna said fiercely, grabbing her hand. You have to make them pay, for your father, for your mother, for everything she's done to you. I'm with you. No matter what happens, I'll be right there. Anna's words bombed into her soul. Natalie felt enormous relief. She wasn't alone. She had someone by her side. Thank you, Anna. Gregory froze. What are you talking about? What garbage did that convince you? You've lost your mind. Believing him. He just wants money. He wants justice. Natalie screamed back. Justice your father stole from him. I have proof. What documents? He laughed in her face. What did you find? Some old notebook. He scribbled together. You sound paranoid. And then he said the one thing that made Natalie's blood run cold. Do you even realize what you're doing? Dragging that ledger around town, showing it to whoever you please. You think this is a game ledger? He said, ledger. Only she knew that word. And Helen and one other person. Natalie stared at her husband, the world narrowing to a single point. He couldn't have known that word. Nicholas didn't know what exactly they had found. He just spoke of records. Helen wouldn't have said it. That left only one person. How do you know about the ledger? She asked, her voice low and foreign. Gregory faltered. He realized he'd said too much. Mom told me. He muttered weakly. But Natalie wasn't listening anymore. She understood. Suddenly, like a lightning strike. Anna, no matter what happens, I'll be right there. Not a soul will hear it. Anna had been Margaret's spy all along. She hadn't just been leaking bits of information. She'd been Margaret's eyes and ears in Natalie's life. At work, in friendship. Every word, every tear, every secret had gone straight to Margaret. And today's conversation, Anna hadn't just listened. She'd interrogated. She'd drawn out the most important detail. And then she'd run straight back to her mistress. Betrayal from her husband was vile. Betrayal from her mother was tragic. But betrayal from her best friend. That was the dirtiest, the most revolting. Struck where there was no defense. Natalie looked at Gregory, then let her gaze drift into emptiness. She realized she was completely alone. There wasn't a single person left she could trust, only enemies. And now they knew she had a weapon. The realization of Anna's betrayal didn't bring tears or screams. It brought an absolute ringing emptiness, as if someone had switched off the light and sound inside her. She stood in the middle of the living room, staring at her husband, babbling about how his mother was just worried and she didn't hear him. All she could see was Anna's face, sympathetic, caring, deceitful. She silently turned and went to the bedroom. She packed a small travel bag with the essentials, underwear, a toothbrush, her passport. She couldn't stay in this house another minute. This house was enemy territory. Her husband was the enemy. Her best friend was the enemy. Her entire world was hostile. Where are you going? Gregory shouted after her as she walked out of the bedroom and headed to the door without a word. Somewhere without lies. She threw over her shoulder without looking back. She slammed the door behind her. Where could she go? To her mother. Well, she couldn't drag her into this any further. To Nicholas. Too dangerous for both him and her. Margaret had surely already set watchers on his house. That left only one option, a hotel. Cheap, anonymous, on the edge of town, a place to hide and think. She paid cash for one night. The room was small with a narrow bed and a window facing a blank wall. Perfect. She laid down and stared at the ceiling. The emptiness inside her slowly filled with cold, calculated anger. She had lost this round. Out of foolishness, out of naivety, she had revealed her strongest card. Now Margaret knew she had the ledger. She knew Natalie had undeniable proof, which meant Margaret would act quickly and brutally. The next morning the phone rang. Margaret's number. Natalie stared at the screen, a chill running down her spine. She'd been expecting this call. She knew it would come. "I want to see you," Margaret said without preamble when Natalie answered. Her voice was still, leaving no room for argument. "Today at my house, 3 o'clock alone." Then she hung up. It wasn't an invitation. It was an order. Natalie knew it was a trap. But she also knew she had no choice. Refusing would mean showing weakness. She had to go. She had to look her in the eye. At exactly 3, she stood before the gates of the Vine mansion. The enormous, pompous house that had always seemed cold and alien now looked like a predator's lair. The gates opened silently. She drove in and parked her modest car next to Margaret's gleaming black Mercedes. A housekeeper opened the door and silently led her into Margaret's study. It was a large, dark room filled with antique furniture. It smelled of leather, wood, and power. Margaret sat behind a massive desk like a spider in the middle of its web. She didn't rise. She just nodded at the chair opposite her. Natalie sat, spine straight, eyes locked on her mother-in-law's cold, sharp gaze. "I know what you have," Margaret began, folding her hands on the desk. "My informant, a very capable girl. She repeats everything word for word." She said it with a faint smirk, making it clear how little she valued Anna, and her report stopped. "The ledger notes from some bitter accountant. Very careless of you to parade your find like that." Natalie stayed silent. She wasn't about to justify herself. "I didn't call you here to threaten you," Margaret continued, shifting her tone to businesslike. "I want to offer you a deal." She slid open a desk drawer and pulled out a folder. Opened it. "I'm ready for a divorce. Very generous one. Here, look." She pushed the document toward Natalie. "This is the agreement. You keep the apartment. Plus, I'll transfer a very generous amount to your account. Enough for you to leave this city and start fresh somewhere by the sea." Natalie didn't even glance at the paper. "In exchange for what?" "In exchange for that notebook and your eternal silence, you hand me the original ledger, all its copies and photos. You get on a plane and disappear. You never come back to this city and you never have contact with your biological father. In return, I guarantee that the secret of your origin dies with me and your mother. No one will ever know." She spoke calmly, calculatingly, as though discussing the terms of a company buyout. She was buying silence, buying her family's reputation. "It's a very profitable offer, Natalie. Think about it. You'll get freedom, money, a quiet life. And what will you get if you refuse?" She pulled another sheet from the folder. "And if you refuse, tomorrow morning, every local paper and news site will publish this." She handed Natalie the page. It was an article. The headline read, "Criminal's Daughter Tries to Blackmail Philanthropist Family." The text was full of lies that Nicholas Frost, recently released after serving time for embezzlement, had found the daughter he abandoned years ago. That together they had conspired, forged documents, and tried to extort money from the widow of his former boss, Frederick Fine. The article even had quotes from family friends describing Natalie as unstable and reckless, all wrapped in sympathy for poor Margaret, the noble widow under attack. It was a knockout. Margaret wasn't just threatening. She had everything ready. She was prepared to destroy Natalie's reputation, drag her name through the mud. And worst of all, she was ready to do the same to Nicholas. To a man who had already lost everything. "People will believe me, Natalie," Margaret said, watching her daughter-in-law's face change. "Me, not you and your jailbird father. I'm a respected woman in this city. And you're nothing. You have 24 hours to think it over. Tomorrow at 3 o'clock my man will call you. You'll tell him where and when you'll hand over the ledger. If not, I push the button." She leaned back in her chair, certain of her victory. She saw the fear in Natalie's eyes. She knew she had her cornered. Natalie slowly set the press release back on the desk. She looked at this powerful, smug woman. She thought of Nicholas, of his tired eyes. She thought of her mother, broken by fear. She thought of herself, of her ruined life. And in that moment she made her choice. "You don't have to wait until tomorrow," she said quietly but firmly. "My answer is no." Margaret frowned. She hadn't expected that. "You're making a big mistake, girl." "Maybe," Natalie said, standing up. "But I'd rather live with mistakes than with your filth." She turned and walked to the door without looking back. She could feel Margaret's burning stare on her back. She left the study, walked down the long, dark hallway. She was almost at the front door when she heard hurried footsteps behind her. "Natalie, wait." It was Gregory. He darted out of some side room where he'd obviously been hiding and listening. His face was pale, frightened. He grabbed her hand, pulled her into a small alcove behind a curtain. "Are you insane?" he whispered, eyes darting around. "Why did you refuse? She'll destroy you." "Let her," Natalie said, trying to pull free. "No." His grip tightened with a strength she had never seen in him before. "Don't trust her." Not a single word. Natalie froze. "What are you talking about?" "She's lying," he whispered even softer, almost soundlessly. "She did the same thing to my father. She destroyed his reputation to get control of his shares. Exactly the way she's trying to destroy you now." Natalie stared at him, not understanding. "The evidence you need isn't in that ledger. It's in his old office. My father's office. She keeps it locked." Gregory's words about his father's locked office hung heavy in the dim alcove. For the first time in days, Natalie didn't just see a weak son tied to his mother, but a man torn apart by fear. He was terrified. Not for her, but for himself, for the secrets buried in that house. She yanked her hand free. "Why should I believe you?" "Because I can't live like this anymore." Tears glistened in his eyes. "She keeps it locked. Locked room. The final frontier. The last hope." The thought didn't bring relief. It brought the realization that the fight wasn't over. That she would have to take one more step, the most dangerous one, to break into the enemy's lair. But how? She had no key, no way to get into that house unseen. And then she realized she had one person left. Someone guilty of many things, but who loved her. Her mother. Natalie started the car. She wasn't going to her mother for comfort or help. She was going for an ally. She no longer had the right to secrets. She had to tell everything from beginning to end. Now open the door. She looked terrible. In the past few days she had aged 10 years. Her eyes were sunken, dark circles beneath them. Of course she had seen the article. "Darling," she began, but Natalie stopped her with a gesture. "Mom, we need to talk." "Seriously." They sat in the kitchen at the same table. Natalie looked her mother straight in the eyes. "I'm going to tell you everything. Everything. And you have to listen without interrupting and forget your fear, because if we don't start fighting now, they'll destroy us both." And she began. She told everything without hiding a thing, about the ledger, about how Gregory's father and her stepfather Andrew had framed Nicholas, about Anna's betrayal, about being fired, about Margaret's threats, and about Gregory's words of the locked office. Na listened, and her face changed. The worry gave way to red blotches. The fear in her eyes turned into something else. Hatred and resolve. When Natalie finished, her mother stayed silent for a long time. Then she got up and walked to the window. "So it was Andrew," she said quietly, staring out at the street. All my life I thought he was my savior. Turns out he was just like the rest of them. He was just waiting for his partner to clear the rival out of the way. There were no tears in her voice, only bitterness and a cold realization. She turned to Natalie, and this time there was no fear in her eyes. There was anger, the righteous anger of a woman who had been deceived her whole life. "What do you want to do?" "I need to get into that office," said Natalie. "It's our only chance, but I need the key and I need Gregory to help me." Na nodded. "He'll help. He fears his mother more than death. But I think he fears himself even more. He said for you to go back to your apartment tonight. He'll leave what you need." Natalie left her mother's house. She didn't know if she could trust Gregory. It could easily be another trap set by Margaret, but she had no choice. Late that evening, she pulled up to her building. The courtyard was empty. She climbed to her floor, her heart pounding so loudly it seemed to echo in the stairwell. She reached her door, bent down, and saw it. Something was tucked under the doormat. She reached out and felt cold metal. Key, old, heavy, ornate. The key to the office. She was about to straighten up when her fingers brushed something else. Taped to the key's loop was a small folded piece of paper. She peeled it off and unfolded it. It was a scrap torn from a notebook. In Gregory's rushed, shaky handwriting were just a few words. Combination. Your real birthday. Natalie froze, staring at the note. Combination. That meant there was a safe in the office. But that wasn't the main thing. The main thing was the phrase itself, your real birthday. Margaret knew her official date of birth, the one written in her passport, the one they had celebrated her entire life. But her real birthday, the day she had actually been born, was known to only 2 people in the world. Her mother Na, and her real father Nicholas. Gregory couldn't have known the date, but he knew it was different. And he knew Margaret didn't know it. This wasn't just a message. It was the ultimate act of betrayal. Betrayal of his mother and the first step toward Natalie. Natalie stood in the stairwell, clutching the heavy key in one hand and the tiny scrap of paper in the other. Combination, your real birthday. Those words changed everything. This wasn't a trap. Gregory had truly crossed over to her side. He hadn't just given her the key to a door. He'd given her the key to the truth. She didn't go into her old apartment. She went back down, sat in the car, and called her mother. "Mom, I need my real birthday. Day, month, and year." There was a moment of silence on the line. "Why, sweetheart? It's the code for the safe." Didn't ask anything else. She understood the stakes. She gave her the date. The one only she knew. Natalie wrote down the numbers on the same scrap beside Gregory's handwriting. Now she had to act. But how to get into the house? Margaret was surely at home. "Mom, I need you to do something," Natalie said. "Find out where Margaret will be tonight. You work at the library. You have access to the city news, the event schedules. I need a window. At least an hour." "I'll do it," Na answered firmly. An hour later she called back. Her voice was tense but steady. "Tonight at 7. There's a charity concert at the Philharmonic for the foundation she started. She'll be there. No question. She's the guest of honor. The concert lasts 2 hours. You'll have your chance." The plan was set. Risky, insane, but the only option left. That evening, waiting until 7:30, Natalie drove to the Vine mansion. She left her car a few blocks away and approached on foot from the back where the fence bordered an abandoned park. Gregory had once let slip in a conversation with her mother that the alarm system on that side of the fence didn't work properly. She prayed it was still broken. She got lucky. The fence was high, but on a nearby tree hung a frayed piece of rope left behind by kids, maybe. With scraped hands, she climbed the tree, pulled herself over the fence, and dropped into the soft earth of the garden. The house was dark. Only one window glowed faintly on the ground floor. Probably the servants' quarters. On tiptoe she circled the house. The terrace door leading to the garden was locked. But Gregory had thought of that too. Under a large flower pot lay another key, ordinary, simple. She slid it into the lock. Her heart stopped. The key turned. She was inside. The house was quiet and hollow. The air carried Margaret's expensive perfume. Moving quickly and carefully, she made her way down the corridor. There it was, the door to Frederick Vine's office, the locked one. She pulled out the old key. It fit perfectly into the keyhole. With a soft click, the lock opened. Natalie stepped inside and froze. This wasn't just an office. It was a museum. A museum of one man's life. A massive dark oak desk, leather chairs, walls lined with books and identical bindings, everything coated in a thin layer of dust. On the wall hung a portrait of Frederick Vine in a heavy gilded frame. He looked out with the same commanding, arrogant expression as his wife. Behind the portrait, she remembered Gregory's words. She stepped onto a chair and with effort lifted down the weighty painting. As she expected, hidden in the wall was a built-in metal safe with a combination lock. She pulled out the slip of paper with the numbers, her real date of birth. Slowly, with her heart pounding, she began to turn the dial number by number. When she pressed the handle, nothing happened. Her stomach dropped. Had Gregory lied or made a mistake? She tried again, more carefully this time, and then she heard it, a faint, almost inaudible click. She pulled the handle again. The safe door gave way and swung open. Inside were folders of financial records, old shares, contracts, not what she needed. She reached deeper, her fingers brushing against something soft, wrapped in fabric. She pulled it out, unfolded it. A bundle of letters, old, yellowed, tied with a faded silk ribbon. She untied it and picked the top envelope. The address C was Andrew Davidson. In the corner where a return address should have been was just a single letter M. She unfolded the paper inside. The handwriting was sharp, forceful, pressing deep into the page. It was Margaret's. "My dear Andrew," Natalie read. "Our plan is working perfectly. That fool Nicholas suspects nothing. He trusts you like a brother. Just a couple more weeks and we'll get him out of the way forever. Then Na will be yours and you'll be mine." Natalie's throat tightened with nausea. She grabbed the next letter. "Andrew, you have to be stronger. Stop doubting yourself. That Frost doesn't deserve her or her love. He's weak. She needs a strong man. Man like you. I'll help you destroy him, and you'll help me get rid of Frederick. I'm tired of his constant control. Once we take over their business, we'll rule this city together." She rifled through the letters feverishly, one after another. They told the whole story. The dirty, repulsive truth, worse than anything she had imagined. It wasn't just about business, not only about money. Margaret and her stepfather, Andrew, had been lovers. They'd been in league from the start. Margaret, a married woman who despised her husband. Andrew, the quiet teacher, consumed by unrequited love for Nina. Together, they struck a devil's bargain. Their motive wasn't only greed. It was jealousy. Margaret craved power and freedom from her husband. Andrew wanted Nina, but he knew that as long as Nicholas Frost lived, she would never look at him. So Margaret, hungry for intrigue and control over other people's lives, devised the plan. A single strike to solve everything. Frame Nicholas, throw him in prison, take his share of the future business, and most importantly, clear the way for Andrew to claim Na's heart. The last letter, written after Nicholas's arrest, had only a few lines. "So it's done, my love. The bird is caged and the other bird will soon fly into yours. Don't let me down." Remember, this wasn't just proof of a crime. It was the key to everything, to Margaret's hatred of Natalie. Natalie was the living reminder of a love Margaret had never managed to erase. She was the daughter of the man Andrew could never push out of Na's heart. She stood frozen in a time-worn office, a bundle of letters in her hands. She was holding a filthy secret. Love, jealousy, betrayal, greed, all crammed into those yellowed pages. Felt like staring straight into hell. Quickly but carefully, she tied the letters back with a ribbon, tucked the bundle under her coat, and left the safe door wide open. Let Margaret see it when she returned. Let her know the game was over. She rehung the portrait, stepped out of the office, locked the door behind her, and slipped out through the garden the same way she had come. Sitting in her car in a dark alley, she struggled to breathe. There wasn't enough air. The truth she had uncovered was monstrous. Her stepfather, the man she had loved, the man she had thought was the model of decency, wasn't just an accomplice. He was the architect of her misery, driven by selfish, sordid passion. This wasn't just betrayal. It was the total destruction of her past. Back in her hotel room, she laid out the letters and reread them under the dim light. Every word, every line dripped with poison. Now she had everything. Paul's ledger proving financial crime and the letters exposing the motive. She was armed with a weapon of mass destruction. But what to do with it? Hand it over to the police. Naive. After so many years with Margaret's power and money, the case would be buried before it began. Give it to the press. They'd publish a scandal, feast on the dirt, then move on. And Margaret, after waiting out the storm, would crawl out spotless again. No, that wasn't enough. She didn't want simple justice. She wanted an execution, a requiem for Margaret's reputation. She had to destroy her, not in court but in society. Make the same crowd that had jeered at Natalie yesterday turn its back on their queen. Turn her name into a curse in this city. She needed a stage, a big one. And she knew exactly where to find it. The next day, she checked the Vine and Partners website. Right on the homepage was a bright banner. Annual Shareholders and Partners Meeting. The date 3 days away. This was it. The perfect stage. The biggest event in the city's business world. The event Margaret always used to flaunt her power, her influence, her supposed integrity. She would step onto that stage and speak about values, legacy, honesty. And in that moment, she would be dragged from her throne. Natalie had 3 days. She started planning. The plan came to her instantly. Clear, cold, merciless. She was no longer the victim. She was the director. The first thing she did was go to Helen. She showed her the letters. The old woman read them in silence, her face growing harsher with each page. "Bastards," she said when she finished the last letter. "They're all bastards." "I need your help," Natalie said. "In your town you must have your own network. Gossip, small talk, old ladies on benches, shop clerks. They spread news faster than the internet." Helen gave a knowing grunt. "And what news are we supposed to spread?" "Child, you need to start a rumor that at the Vine family shareholders meeting, a terrible secret about the company's founding will come to light. That some old dirty business is about to be exposed. Don't say anything concrete, just hints. Fog enough to intrigue people, to make them whisper. I want as many curious faces in that hall as possible." Helen looked at her approvingly, mischief sparking in her eyes. "I'll do it," she said. "Trust me, by tomorrow night the whole town will be buzzing. I know which strings to pull." The second step was a call to her mother. "Mom, I need your help too. You've worked in the library your whole life. You know everyone in the city. Teachers, doctors, minor officials, the ones they call the old intelligentsia. People with spotless reputations, people whose voices carry weight. What do you want me to do?" Na's voice held no fear now, only resolve. "You have to call them, all of them. Invite them to the shareholders' meeting. Tell them their presence is crucial, that the honor and dignity of our city are at stake, that their moral authority is needed to prevent a great injustice. They'll be our jury." "I understand," Nina answered firmly. "They'll be there." Over the next 2 days, Natalie prepared the stage. She made high-quality copies of the most damning pages of the ledger and the most incriminating letters. She organized them into folders. She was preparing the props for her performance. She barely slept, running on coffee and hatred. She knew Margaret was furious. The open safe had been a declaration of war. Her mother-in-law was no doubt hunting for her, but Natalie used no phone, went nowhere familiar. She stayed hidden like a sniper waiting for the shot. The night before the meeting, as Natalie sat in her hotel room checking the folders for the 100th time, her phone rang. The number was blocked. She hesitated, then answered. "Natalie, it's Gregory." His voice was low, tense. She braced herself, for threats, maybe begging. Anna told Mom you visited that old widow, the accountant's wife, he said. And that you found not just the ledger but some letters. Is that true? So Anna was still spying, trying to fish for information through mutual contacts. True, Natalie said. She waited for him to beg her to hand it all over to save the family. But instead he said something entirely different. I saw the program for tomorrow's meeting. Mom will give the closing speech. She always does it last, so her word is final. Her speech is scheduled for 1:30 sharp. You'll have no more than 15 minutes while she's on stage. Use that time. Gregory's call became the final piece of the puzzle. He hadn't just given her the key. He'd given her the exact coordinates for the strike. Now Natalie had everything. The morning of the meeting was gray and foggy. The weather matched the mood. Natalie felt no fear, no nerves, only a cold, ringing emptiness, the focus of a surgeon before a difficult operation. She dressed simply. Black pants, a crisp white shirt, nothing flashy. She had to look not like an avenger, but like someone coming for the truth. The city's cultural hall was packed. Helen's rumors and Ninua's calls had done their job. Besides shareholders and business partners, there were plenty of outsiders. Natalie spotted stern silver-haired men and women in the back rows, the moral authorities her mother had summoned. She also recognized curious faces from Helen's town, hungry for spectacle. The air hummed with tense anticipation. Natalie slipped in among the last arrivals. She stood against the wall at the very back, doing her best not to draw attention. She saw Anna. She sat in the front row among top managers, dressed in a new business suit, a new hairstyle. She looked as if she had been born for this life. When Anna's eyes landed on Natalie, her face twisted for a moment before she turned away with a smirk, whispering something to her neighbor. The meeting dragged on. Boring reports, numbers, charts. Natalie barely listened. Her eyes were on the clock and on the star of the day. Margaret sat at the center of the presidium. She was in her element, commanding, confident, radiant. She bantered with the mayor, nodded graciously to the speakers. She was the queen at her ball, oblivious that the hour of execution was near. Natalie knew Margaret was aware of her presence. Anna surely had reported it already, but her mother-in-law gave no sign. She was certain Natalie had come only to witness her complete defeat, to watch her triumph. Finally the host announced, and now, with closing remarks on the future and values of our company, the chair of the board, the Honorable Margaret Vine. The hall erupted in applause. Margaret rose with a smile and walked to the podium. She wore an elegant gray suit that emphasized her severe beauty. This was the moment, 1:30. As Margaret reached the podium and the applause died down, Natalie stepped out of the shadows. Slowly but with steady confidence, she walked down the central aisle. In her hand, she held a small wireless microphone already linked to a portable speaker hidden in her bag. Whispers spread through the hall. People recognized her. The girl from the scandalous article. What was she doing here? What kind of stunt was this? Margaret saw her. A flash of surprise crossed her face, quickly replaced by a contemptuous smirk. She made a barely noticeable gesture to her head of security standing by the stage. He tensed, ready to throw the intruder out on her command. Natalie reached the first rows and stopped a few meters from the stage. She didn't look at the guards. She looked straight into Margaret's eyes. Margaret, her voice amplified by the microphone, rang out steady and strong. "I'm sorry to interrupt your triumph." Margaret's smirk widened. "Young lady, I think you've come to the wrong place," she said into her own microphone. Security escort her out. Clearly, she's having some kind of nervous breakdown. 2 guards started toward Natalie, but she was quicker. "Just 1 minute," she said firmly. "Before we celebrate the future of this company, we need to face its past." There was such power in her voice that the guards froze for a moment. The hall fell silent, waiting. Margaret realized something irreversible was about to happen. Her face hardened. "Remove her," she shouted, but it was too late. Natalie didn't pull copies out of her bag. She didn't start reading anything. She went for something far more powerful. This company, she said loudly and clearly, was built on lies, betrayal, and a broken life. And today, I'd like to introduce you to the man on whose ruin your fortune was made. She paused, turned, and looked toward the heavy double doors at the back of the hall. Please welcome him. In complete silence, the doors slowly opened, and Nicholas appeared. But this was not the broken, hunched man in a stretched-out t-shirt she had once found in his shabby apartment. This was a different man entirely. He wore a sharp, well-fitted suit. He was freshly shaved. His gray hair was neatly trimmed. He stood tall, shoulders back, his gaze calm and dignified as it swept the hall. The weariness and bitterness in his eyes hadn't vanished. But now they were hidden behind the armor of newfound strength. He was no longer a victim. He was a man reclaiming his name. The hall gasped. A wave of shock rippled through the rows. People recognized him. The criminal from the old newspaper photo. On stage, Margaret froze. Her face turned into a white mask. She stared at Nicholas, and for the first time real fear, raw animal fear, showed in her eyes. She hadn't expected this. She thought he was broken, destroyed. Nicholas walked slowly down the aisle toward the stage. People stepped aside for him. But that wasn't the biggest shock. After a few steps, another man emerged from the doorway. Someone who had been standing behind Nicholas all along. It was Gregory. He walked beside Nicholas, not behind, beside him, shoulder to shoulder. His face was pale but resolute. He didn't look at his mother. He looked straight ahead. He had made his final choice, and he made it in public. Gregory's appearance at Nicholas's side was the spark that set the hall ablaze. It wasn't just the return of a disgraced father. It was the fracture of the Vine dynasty itself. The son had turned against the mother in front of everyone. The murmur swelled into a roar. People leapt to their feet, turning, pointing. Reporters swarmed their cameras from the stage to this unbelievable procession. Nicholas and Gregory reached the stage. Natalie held out her microphone to her father. He took it. His hand didn't tremble. Margaret seemed petrified. The smirk had drained from her face, leaving only horror and disbelief. She looked at her son with a mix of plea, command, and threat all at once. But Gregory didn't look at her. He looked at Natalie, and in his eyes was an apology. "My name is Nicholas Frost," he said. His voice amplified through the hall, calm but carrying the strength of a man with nothing left to lose. 37 years ago, I stood on the edge of a new life. I had a woman I loved, a child on the way, and a business plan I believed would change my life. But my partners had other plans. As he spoke, the second act of the spectacle began. Figures moved into the aisles between the rows. Na, quiet, unassuming but with a firm face. Helen, stern and straight as a drawn bow, and several elderly women. Na's friends from the library, whom Natalie had never met, moved in unison like a trained squad. Each carried a stack of papers. They began handing them out to shareholders, city council members, journalists, and those moral authorities in the back rows. My partners, Nicholas went on, Frederick Vine and Andrew Davidson, stole my business, my freedom, and my family. They buried me in prison for years. The sound of papers rustling filled the hall. People leaned in, reading the copies. Shock spread across their faces as they saw the ledger pages, the red pencil notes, the numbers that didn't add up. Then something clicked in the hall. On the big screen behind Margaret, where company growth charts had been shown moments before, a new image appeared. It came from an old overhead projector Na's friends had set up in the control booth. The projection was slightly blurry, but the words were clear. It was a copy of Margaret's first letter to Andrew. "My dear Andrew, our plan is working perfectly." The hall gasped again. This wasn't just accusation anymore. This was proof. Direct. Undeniable. They thought they had buried the truth. Nicholas's voice hardened. But truth, like people, sometimes comes back. I didn't return for money. I came back for my name and for the honor of my daughter, the one you tried to drag through the mud. On stage, Margaret shifted her gaze from Nicholas to the screen behind her. She saw her own handwriting, her own words. In that moment, she knew she had lost completely and irreversibly. She tried to say something into the microphone, but only a rasp came out. The projector switched to the next letter. "Andrew, you have to be tougher. I'll help you destroy him, and you'll help me get rid of Frederick." Now the hall was no longer whispering. It rumbled with anger and outrage. People turned toward Margaret. There was no admiration in their eyes anymore, only disgust and contempt. "This is all lies," Margaret finally screamed, her voice breaking. "It's a fake. He's deceiving all of you." But no one believed her. The evidence was in everyone's hands. Then one of the most influential women in the city stood up, the owner of a rival corporation, always considered Margaret's closest ally and friend. She stood in the front row holding copies of the letters. "Margaret," she said loudly, her voice cutting through the noise, "I knew your husband, and I always wondered how quickly you got your hands on his business after his death. Now I understand. You are a disgrace to this city. I want nothing to do with you." It was a public execution. Her closest ally had just disowned her in front of everyone. Her empire was collapsing like a house of cards. Shareholders in the front rows began to rise and leave the hall in protest. Journalists sensing blood rushed the stage, cameras flashing in the face of a crushed, broken woman. Gregory took the microphone from his father. "On behalf of the Vine family, I offer my deepest apologies to Nicholas Frost and his daughter Natalie," he said firmly, clearly. "I am announcing a full internal investigation of this company from the day it was founded. There will be an independent audit. We will do everything to restore justice and compensate for the damage done." He turned to his mother. "And you," he said quietly, but loud enough for all to hear. "You no longer have anything to do with this company or this family." Margaret stared at him with empty eyes. She was left on stage alone, completely alone under the stage lights with cameras flashing, surrounded by the hatred and contempt of the crowd that had cheered her just half an hour earlier. Her world had collapsed. Natalie stood in the middle of the hall watching the chaos, the downfall, and she felt no joy, no triumph, only emptiness and an enormous, endless relief. It was over. Nicholas walked up to her, her father. He simply took her hand. Na stood beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. For the first time in her life they stood together. Her real family. Gregory approached them. He stopped a few steps away, not daring to come closer. "Natalie, I'm sorry," he said. Natalie looked at him. She felt neither love nor hatred anymore, only pity and a kind of detached gratitude for that final decisive act. She nodded silently. That was enough. They left the hall together, moving through the crowd that now stepped aside with respect. They stepped out into the gray, misty day, and to Natalie, it felt like the brightest, sunniest day of her life. Months passed. The storm died down. Margaret disappeared. Rumor had it she sold her shares and moved abroad to some small country without an extradition treaty. No one in respectable society spoke her name again. Anna was fired from the restaurant the very next day after the meeting. Gregory, the new broom, swept clean. She tried to find another job, but her reputation arrived before she did. No one wanted to hire a Judas. Gregory kept his word. He transferred a huge sum to Nicholas's account, his rightful share of the business for all those years with interest and compensation. Nicholas bought a modest apartment in a good neighborhood near the park. Most importantly, he won full rehabilitation in court. His name was cleared. Natalie divorced Gregory quietly without scandal. They remained strangers, bound only by a dark past. She didn't return to the restaurant. She quit for good. She needed a fresh start. She stood on the balcony of her father's new apartment. He stood beside her. Her mother too. The three of them silently looked out at the city. They were learning to be a family. It wasn't easy, but they tried. Natalie pulled out her phone, opened her contacts, found Anna's number. Her finger hovered for a moment over the delete button. So many years of friendship, so many shared memories, but it had all been a lie. She pressed the button. The contact was gone. Then she found Gregory's number and deleted it too. She slipped her phone back into her pocket. Beyond the park trees, the sun was setting. The sky was clear and bright. She took a deep breath. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she could breathe freely. She was free. And that's how this incredible story ends. Dear friends, what a ride. What a storm of emotions. At first, it feels like an ordinary family quarrel. But as the threads unravel, a terrifying web of lies spanning decades comes to light, leaving you breathless. This story makes you think about how well we truly know the people closest to us. Natalie thought she knew her husband, her mother, her best friend, but her whole life had been built on lies. Do you think she did the right thing in the end? Was that public reckoning of Margaret justified? Or should she have chosen another way? Can something like what Margaret did ever be forgiven? Or did she deserve such a ruthless downfall? And what about Gregory? His act at the end when he stood by Nicholas. Was that redemption or just the fear of a weak man realizing his mother's ship was sinking and jumping to the lifeboat at the last moment? Can such weakness be forgiven? But perhaps the cruelest blow of all, the betrayal of her best friend, Anna. How do you recover from something like that? Thanks for watching. Take care. Good luck.